Welcome, everybody. And I want to begin by saying thank you, Max, for acknowledging my work as a writer. As a critic, I would never, ever ask an artist what they're doing in their work or what they think they're doing in their work and then type that up and publish it. I really love to interact with the work, and then if what I say resonates with the artist, that's really, really meaningful for me, especially if it's an artist I really, really respect. And that's really why I do what I do. So I'm really happy that that worked out. And I want to start, Max, with your most recent works. And by most recent, I mean probably the last 7 years, moving to the Greek crosses, and then the ones from just this year, the Ivory and Ebony and Ivory series. And for me, you're an extremely focused and concentrated artist. And for years, we're refining and expanding what you were doing. And then to me, all of a sudden, wham, something big happened. Would you care to comment on that kind of development?
Well, you know me, I make really long comments.
We have all afternoon.
First, I want to go back to my relationship with David. He started reviewing my work very early when I first got out of graduate school and was very immature. I have never met David until yesterday. I never have wanted to have an exchange of thoughts with him about my work because I value his depth of perception. I have appreciated that for many years, and I wanted that to stay pure, which it has. It's rare that a critic sees work over 60 years. It's actually been more than 60 years, with the only dialogue between the two of us being the work itself. That's pure, and you preserve that. So thank you. My work has developed over the years. It's gone through changes. Every time it goes through a change, it alarms a lot of people. Well, because they don't understand that for something to grow, it has to change for it to stay alive. And I have never wanted to be in the position of endless repetition of something because it was successful at a certain point. As I've seen that over time, and well, I've been doing this for so long, I've seen many, many artists, and you get to a certain point, have success, and you stay there. Well, what happens? You die there. It becomes predictable the moment that you cease to take risk. I'm not afraid of risk. I don't let anything leave the studio unless I'm completely convinced about it. So I have to live with things by myself over a little bit of time. It is possible for artists to actually alter their perception. You can see things that aren't even there. And it takes a little time for you to detach yourself enough from the work in order to really see it as an artist. My work, by the way, is very slow in execution, but it also is very slow in communication. You don't instantly look at a painting and understand that it has all kinds of nuances and so forth. Those subtleties to me are extremely important. One point that I want to make at the beginning of this conversation is what this exhibition has meant to me, because I've never, a lot of the works that are in this exhibition I have not seen since they were made. I make them, I box them up, put them in the storage, and go on to the next thing. And there are maybe 4 or 5 paintings I haven't seen since they were made. To me, this is really wonderful because I got a fresh take on what I'm doing. And along the way, I have made changes. Well, this exhibition shows me that those aren't changes, those are just different points along the circle. And I really didn't realize that. If you take the works that I'm making in 22, they naturally grew from the ones I was making in the 70s. Well, you have to see an exhibition like this in order to fully realize that. This is a really long answer to your question.
I'm even eager for more. So so the Greek crosses to you, did it feel like something new? Did it feel like a circling back? Did it feel like an intensification? Was it like a big moment when the first one happened, or?
When I was in graduate school, the first Greek cross, the one with the shirt on it, I made, took a lot of criticism for it, which was valuable because it makes you think about what you're doing, if you believe that or not. And then I graduated, I got my MFA. You think you're a hotshot and you know everything there is to know. Actually, you don't know anything. I started showing early, and I had 2 shows, gallery shows, and decided I don't know who I am. So what I did is shut myself in the studio. I was working in Pasadena in a big old abandoned warehouse, condemned warehouse. So electricity came for a block away down a really big extension cord. And it was cold as everything, wasn't any heat. So after I caught my pants on fire, backed up to a little wood stove, beat the fire out, I decided I have to change this, and there was a gas line coming up in the alley, but no meter. So I went to the junkyard and bought an old gas meter and installed it myself and ran gas lines all over the stuff, and then was talking to a plumber friend of mine. So he came out and checked, and there weren't any leaks or anything. Well, I couldn't get a meter for the building because it's a condemned building. So I was warm there for a couple of 3 years. What I did in that space, I had no visitors. I made no shows. I shut myself away until I finally understood my philosophy and my direction. And a couple of things happened. I was making gigantic paintings. They were about 12 feet high and maybe 20 feet wide. They split in the middle because I couldn't move them before. And somebody from the Brand Art Center saw those works somehow. They were in the studio, they hadn't gone out, and so I did a show at the Brand. And they were, I no longer have those works. They were destroyed because you can't deal with just the volume of works that massive. And I have photographs though. They were the absolute roots of what I'm doing now, repetitive elements, and a collection of a lot of little marks along with other things. At that point, the marks are white. Now they're black. Anyway, that's where the work came from. And I'm not a hustler. I've never gone out and tried to get anything from my work, an exhibition or anything else. I don't ask anybody to come to the studio. The work either lives by itself or it doesn't. So I'm not interested in helping it along. For one thing, I think all the things that come artificially can't be trusted. Things that come of their own volition, you better pay attention to it because there's a reason for them to come. And that gives validity. I may be rambling.
No, I'll wriggle you in if you get out of line. But I'm glad you brought up that piece, Max, that I think of like the only piece in your show that would be called a work of found object art with the fabric clothing.
Yes.
Put right on, because when I went through the show, to me there was a powerful resonance between that one and the Greek crosses. And then when I went back, and I never read the titles until after I've looked at the work, and I read the title, and I think it's called Crucifixion.
It is called Crucifixion.
And to me, that has, on the one hand, really explicit religious references, but for me, it's more than that, and it's also kind of about suffering and sacrifice. And I thought that those things might be important to you in your work, and was wondering if you'd care to talk about.
Well, I think those are valid comments. That painting, by the way, I made was when I was a grad student, and I took tremendous criticism for that painting.
Because?
Well, because people thought that it was sacrilegious, and they also thought that that was blood on the shirt tail. That's actually paint. That was on paint shirt. I just took it off and put it on the canvas.
Well, it is sacrilege.
It was important to me what happened there. There were all kinds of letters to the editor in the Tucson newspaper protesting that work, that children shouldn't be exposed to it and so on. And they wouldn't let me respond for a long time. I finally made them let me respond, which went just fine. They published a little article I wrote. A month later, Tucson made me Citizen of the Month. But I was amazed that art can arouse such passion. This is a really, really valid point. I think for it to do that, the work has to be completely honest. I don't think it can be faked. It's like you don't set something up. But it's inherent within the work itself. At any rate, that painting has been important to all the rest of my development. For one thing, it defines that I'm dealing with horizontal versus vertical as a basic format. And that's all I need. I'm not trying to reproduce anything or a mood or anything like that. The intensity of making the work, obviously there's intensity, or you can't make all those millions of little lines without thinking about every single one of them. They have to be perfect too, and you can't change them. You put them down once and that's it. That means that it's not labor. It becomes a process, it's very much akin to meditation, and has a purity. And I'm not talking in terms of religion. I'm talking in terms of the human spirit. The Greek, so the works evolved, getting more and more horizontal. By the way, those really large, the one very large horizontal painting was done at a time in New York when I thought, I'll never show another painting again in my life. Well, because it became Julian Schnabel bed painting era. And I have
taste
been,
had changed.
well, I have been mistakenly identified as a constructivist. I am not. Constructivist implies a total involvement in intellectual composition and content. I'm the other part of the Russian constructivist movement, which two parts. Malevich, that part of the constructivist period dealt with the spiritual. The other part deals with intellectual, and they are two separate things. The Russian constructivists via Malevich does not mean sentimentality. That's a kind of a very superficial, but I do believe in the spirit. And so the intellectual to me alone is not enough. That's why I'm there. I am rambling all over this.
Yeah.
review.
And the Greek crosses for me, Max, I didn't think like a historical crucifixion or anything in the past. I looked at those as like a person, which is a body, standing there saying, here I am, this is it. This is everything. And to me, that was a great concentration happening from the works just before those, where it really felt like a being in the room with me. Does that rhyme with any of your thoughts, or?
Well, I haven't thought about it in that way, but I think that probably is a part of it. I see it as an opposition of two forces, both, and that establishes an equilibrium, particularly when it's on a square format. The new works I'm working on are the first vertical ones since I was a kid. Working with the cross form is loaded with connotations, and I'm not dealing with it from a traditional religious perspective. That differs from a spiritual perspective. The spiritual has always been a big consideration for me throughout my work. I'm not Catholic. I've been invited by the Vatican 3 times, and I've also made a lot of exhibitions in cathedrals in Europe. I was very impressed with Pope Benedict. He didn't care if I was Catholic or not. We speak a common language that's above all that stuff. To me, it's seminal that art be a spiritual communication, and it only works if communication goes 2 ways. Otherwise, you're just throwing stuff out there. Well, that's not what I'm interested in. I'm gratified. I'm validated by the fact that people can understand where this work is coming from. I don't care if it's intellectual, but if there's a connection on a spiritual level, to me, that's what this is about. I don't think art is meant to provide any answers. It's just another language that people can communicate with, and I think that it can be very uplifting. Now I'm rambling.
No.
You have to reach in and
I
rescue
want to
me.
circle back and pick up this idea of isolation that was important to you in your studio in Pasadena, where you had done a couple shows, and then decided, like, I got to figure out what's going on for me before I'm at this public conversation. And I think you didn't show for like 5 years, and you
I
hunkered
didn't.
down
I
in
quit.
your
I quit
studio.
entirely.
And that was essential for your development
It
as an artist.
absolutely was.
Yeah.
When you're
And I want to link that back to something you said about your childhood in another interview you did with Douglas Dryspoon for the terrific 2018 book by Radius. And you said something like, well, this isolation from art growing up was really good for me because I never had to unlearn any bad work. Heck, we didn't even have Sunday painters.
That's true. Well, I have to tell you something about my childhood first. I remember the day World War II broke out. My father came home from work and said that Pearl Harbor had been bombed and we have to move. We were actually right up the road. We're in Mancos, Colorado. I remember that day clearly, and I was only 3 years old. So we moved back to Kansas, where most of the family was. And then he got work building. He was a heavy equipment mechanic, big earth moving machines and all that kind of stuff. They were building airstrips all over the Southwest. I think a lot of counties had military airstrips, and my father worked on those, and also cuts through hills and dam projects, big, huge dams. So we moved all the time. And by the time I was in the 6th grade, I went to 16 different schools. So there was zero continuity. Well, I established my own continuity. I made art from the time I was a little kid on. Did it for a couple of reasons. I established a continuing world because it's portable. And I got acceptance in the new schools because I could make art really well. And also got supplies. But what it was is a portable identity for myself, not from anybody else. So there's never been a time that I didn't make art for very private reasons. I had to establish some kind of thread that connected everything together. And so that's what I did, and I could do it anywhere. So that's now is in a way a continuation of this. This is a really long answer. It's not to your question.
Well, I love that you I had the isolation and identity were the two next questions I was going to ask, because they both start with I, and so I remember what to ask. Identity is a big deal in the art world now, and I wanted to ask you about your identity as an artist, but you kind of already answered that, where like, yeah, and it seems to me, without putting words in your mouth, that you established a place and a continuum for yourself as a human being through art. So your art was an essential element of your identity from when you were 3.
I would add that there is no wall between self and my art. It's one and the same. It's melded. It's not something that I can put to the side. It's always been that way. It's never going to change. As I actually have lived art. It's become who I am. The isolation factor is really important. I don't have very much respect or need for raw emotion. It's superficial and is connected to the ego, and it's very wasteful. Doesn't mean
I wish
once
you could
in a
tell
while
that
I
to a few
don't
of my
get
friends.
kicked off, because I do. But that's not what my life is.
Right.
It's a totally individual thing. It does not have to be connected to a religion or any other thing. It's, but it is just through the recognition that the spirit exists is a recognition of a greater reality. And this is off the point also, completely. There is a very large connection between things like physics to what I'm doing. There's truth in things like physics, like the idea that I've expressed before. The definition of a point, of a line, is a moving point in space. And the energy of making that line remains embedded in the line. That's why I'm using line. That is a connection between spirituality and physics. I think the more we find about the universe, the more exciting it's going to get, because it's going to expand a whole lot of things.
And so did you know right from you're really young that art was essential to your life? Or did it come to you, that realization come later? Was it a slow dawning, or was it like a bolt of lightning? Or?
Always been essential to my life. I'm going to tell you a story that's embarrassing that I haven't told anybody. When I was 3, I found a yellow crayon. And, okay, I don't have any pockets. And so I carried it in my nostril. And eventually, yeah, we used to take it out of your jaw. So it got really small. And it lodged way
A little
up
too
in
far
my
up.
nose, and they took me to the doctor, and they couldn't get it out. And so my father took me outside and gave me one hell of a spanking. I squalled so hard, the crayon flew out. I remember that very clearly.
Do you still have the drawings?
No, it was a tiny little thing. It was just enough to clog up my whole breathing thing. I have always drawn, and when I was the first grade, I got in really horrible trouble because I found a piece of chalk. And, okay, so I can't read. I picked it up and drew the F word all over the whole school. And I don't know what that means.
Well, that was your conceptual piece.
So got sent to the principal, and I don't know what I did. He finally let me go back to class, because I didn't use the F word anymore. Well, I don't know what it is. Anyway, I used to draw all the time. Sorry about these bad.
No. And did you ever think it would be a career, or was it that?
No, I never thought about it as a career. When I was very young, I got married, and my husband died in a car wreck when I was 20. And
with 2 kids.
So, okay, I got to do something. We didn't have any money. I got to go to school. And first semester I went to junior college. You know, you got to get to fix it. And they took drawing class. I took art classes. And And then I transferred to a university and took art classes. 'Cause I've always been an artist. And while I was there, I think I told you this story about the black paintings. Well, I started making all black paintings, and good students got a little tiny studio, and so I had a studio even though I was an undergrad. And there was a little gallery there. It was on a Sunday, and the gallery was between shows, and so you got all these nice blank walls. And I want to see what those black paintings look hanging up on nice, clean white walls. So I hung them. And somebody from the psychology department happened by and saw these black paintings. And Monday morning, I got a call from the department chairman that I had to go see the psychology people. And because of those black paintings, what's wrong with black? If you look at the universe, it's mostly black. Black has mystery, doesn't mean I got problems. So I decided that, okay, the psychology department really has a lot of problems if they're afraid of the dark. And I'm not going to go and see them because I'm just fine, and so I didn't. Not very long after that was the first time Malavius was shown, and you could even see reproduction in this country. That's an affirmation. So that is the start of this direction that I've pursued all these many years. I have to say it has been incredibly rich and rewarding. It is so grand for an artist to be able to actually communicate with another person on the basis of what's in your soul, and the art does that. I don't think there are very many music. That's a form of art. It can happen. I'm talking all the time.
It's good stuff. There's another another interview you did, Max. The interview asked you about age and if like working now was a lot different from working when you just started out. And you had an answer that I really loved. You said like, no, I'm still trying to discover stuff in my work. Anybody who thinks that they know the answers is either a bore or a fool.
That's true. That's true. I can think of nothing more useless than marching in place. I think the minute that you no longer have curiosity, the mysteries can't be solved. They're immense. They're beyond the comprehension of any one person. But this quest is about those mysteries. And I find it a necessary part of being to push forward. And I intend to until the day I die, even if I'm making things like a postcard. Size doesn't have anything to do with it. I think at a certain age, you have to prove your toughness and your
the big paintings,
proudness and all that stuff. Well, I don't need to prove that.
No.
So I'm perfectly comfortable working with whatever I can. It's satisfying. It doesn't have to be grand scale. And the most gratifying thing that I can think of being an old artist who's been around this long, is the fact of I'm communicating to every single one of you, or you wouldn't be here. If that can happen, then you're talking to yourself. And it's much more gratifying to be talking to someone.
I want to go back to what you said about physics and the a line being the movement between 2 points. And there are a couple other instances where I read about what you were describing what you're after in your paintings, and it was kind of like almost this like capturing this quivering energy of the mark making and keeping it there. And could you say a little bit more about that?
To keep that consistency is never perfect. That's the reason it quivers, because I don't measure anything. I think measuring is really boring. That's just mechanical. You have to get your head to exactly the same. Obviously, you're never able to complete a line without being interrupted, or you got to sleep and eat and all kinds of other things. Phone rings. But you have to get your head in that place, and the fact that it's not possible to get your head exactly on that place. So there's going to be some variation. That provides part of the quiver. The other part is this thing I mentioned earlier of the energy of moving that dot to create the line itself. That energy becomes a part of the painting.
Yeah.
Does this answer your question?
Yeah.
I give a long answer.
Not that long. But then there's another point of where you were talking about intuition, and I think it'd be important to bring that up now. And I think you had said something like, I never know what the painting is going to look like when I begin. I just get started, and it comes out how it has to be, or something like that.
That's true. I can't plan my painting. I can set the format, scale, but I don't know what's going to happen on the painting until I get in it. I just start, and it starts developing a certain characteristic, a certain mood, a certain amount of intensity. And so I just get on that same thread and carry it through. There are times when I can't do that, and there are failed paintings, which I destroy. Because I don't try to patch anything up and make it into something that's not. Either it's a complete statement or else it gets destroyed. I don't worry about communication because all of you are here. Everybody is open to communication of painting, or you wouldn't even be here. That's automatic. I have to say that it is so gratifying for me to have this communication. It means I haven't been talking to myself for 60 years.
Then I wanted to talk to you about a couple of F words, and failure and fear, and and you just brought up the idea of failure when you're working on a work and it doesn't work and it gets chucked, and I think it's important to bring that out. And
there's no reason to. If it fails, it does not have life, and there's no reason for it to exist. So I think it kind of keeps you humble if you fail once in a while. You get knocked off your ego real fast. I can think of nothing more boring than hitting a hole in one every time you hit the golf ball.
Or thinking you do.
Yeah.
It's even worse. And does it happen at all different processes in a painting, or does it ever happen like really quickly? Oh, this has gone wrong. Get rid of the canvas and linen, or is it?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
When you realize it's not, when it's a failure, does it happen sometimes really early on in the process or really late? Is it always different? Is it
Midway.
Midway. Yeah.
Midway. You can tell those things are forced. And the usual reason is sometimes you can't get focused. And okay, so you go ahead and work anyway. Well, if you can't get focused, you shouldn't be working. I think that probably Jackson Pollack, even though he worked with emotion, which I love, I do not condemn emotion. It's just not my direction.
Right.
I think Jackson Pollack probably had the same feelings once in a while. That a painting has been forced or something. I never knew Pollack, but he was totally engaged in his work, as am I. And so I would imagine that working emotionally as he did, there must have been occasionally times when the same block happened. I can't imagine it wouldn't.
But it's what you're after is a kind of unforcedness.
Yes.
Where things like,
Yes.
where you follow what's just happening, or
Yeah.
and it feels, what, graceful?
It feels a sense of completion, a sense of calmness. I can't say satisfaction because if
that's
you
too
reach
personal,
satisfaction, you'll stop painting.
Yeah.
But a sense of completing a step, I would say. I think it has to be open-ended. I have no idea where the works are going to go. I really don't. I know they won't exist if they aren't good. I'll destroy them. I don't expect there to be any major changes because I'm not about to change my personality, not at this point. So it's going to be things that grow out. One of the things I want to hit on, if you don't mind.
Yeah, hit away.
Life is pretty much a circle, which I realized when we put this show up, because I was afraid these new paintings were not going to be related to what I've been before. They are directly related. It's the circle is far from closed from these new paintings that are in this exhibition to when I finally stop making art, which is I'm either blind or dead. There's a gap there because I'm not finished with this by any means. They're never going to be gigantic again, owing to the fact that I will continue to refuse a studio assistant. So they may get awfully small before I'm finished, but.
Yeah, that sense of kind of like unforcedness or that calmness to me really comes through in the galleries where there's two primarily white, or more lighter colored ones, horizontal pieces next to each other.
Oh, those horizontal pieces?
Yeah, and to me, like, you stand before one, it's just like, yes, everything is in its right place at this moment and this time. It's just perfect. And then you go stand on the next one, it's like, and this is really different from that, and it's also perfect. And to me, that's a really lovely moment. It's just, and it's like, I mean, it's not perfect. It feels like closed, but there's just like, everything just feels right. Like when the waves are lapping on the shore, it's just the right rhythm.
I am so grateful for this exhibition because those two particular paintings that you're talking about, I made them. I don't remember the date. It's a long time. I boxed them up. I haven't seen them since until they were hanging on the walls in here.
They're good ones.
Do you know what this does to me? I love this. I haven't seen them for maybe 30 years or something.
But each one has its own like rhythm, its own hum, its own pace, and its own atmosphere. And when you're from far away, it's like, oh, they look almost exactly the same. Like they're not even close to this.
Yeah, well, they changed a lot over time. As I think your body changes and your way you see things and everything else, your experiences and where you are. All those things are bound to have an effect. I'm so gratified because I was wondering where in this spectrum of work are these new paintings. and it's, for me, it's an affirmation that they're a part of this progression. And so that question has been solved for me for this exhibition. I really appreciate it. And I also appreciate that this staff at this site has been amenable to everything I wanted to do.
It's because you're so reasonable.
They're great. They're wonderful. Well, it was really important to have that last room be just current work.
Do you want to talk a little bit about tantric art?
About what?
Tantric art?
Tantric art?
Yeah. Or no?
Well, you can ask the question.
It seems to me it's an interest you've had in the, and not in terms of how the work looks, but in terms of the way the work functions. And is that true?
Well, yes. As you can see, I just don't pay any attention at all to composition. As I don't think all those traditional things necessarily have to apply to everything. And so you can kind of make your own rules. You have built-in things in your sensibility that you've been conditioned for years about composition, all that stuff. You don't even have to think about that. That stuff is ingrained. And so I think I rely on instinct.
You know, I was thinking more in terms of what I took from tantric work was like the egolessness, that it wasn't about the artist. It was actually about doing something in the world, and that there was a quest for some kind of harmony. And so to me, those were putting you in the same universe as that.
Yeah. I try to keep ego out of it. It's the big I, and I think the big I has to be set aside because you can't get past it. The ego is so tied to emotion that it doesn't allow a connection to the spirit. So not to invalidate every other artist who's worked with ego, but it's not what I'm concerned with. I'm concerned with going beyond the sense of self. And emotion, everybody has emotion, including me, but I don't want it there in my art. So I shut it out. In a sense, it's stepping beyond a certain sense of self. I have an ego, everybody does, that's a part of it. But I don't think it necessarily has to be a part of art. And for me, it's completely a non-essential because I think it becomes a barrier to the spiritual.
And that art's about like getting beyond the self to something.
Yeah. I think every culture has had aspects of what we're speaking of. It may look different formally, but I think every culture has approached spirituality not by way things look, not by emotion, but by something else. I think it's true in every culture. In this hotel I'm staying in, last few nights, it's been really difficult to go in and go to bed. Well, there's a Indian chief in there playing a flute. Have you ever heard that?
No, I think I'm in a different hotel.
It's oh God, it is.
I have a guy on his cell phone outside.
Really beautiful.
Oh, wow.
Well, he was there last night, and 3 nights before that. You just kind of sit down there and listen to this. It's a musical equivalent of what we're talking about. So I think it's been an old everculture.
Thank you so much, Max, for
Thank you
making these paintings and for talking so openly and clearly about such big ideas in such a conversational way.
I have appreciated you for many years because you really understand art and you really write good criticism.
Thanks.
Thank you.
My pleasure.